Okay, let's unpack this. We've got some really fascinating material today, stuff you sent in. And it tackles a huge idea
Yeah, really big.
that human value, it's inherent, right? It's
Yeah.
just part of us. But history, well, history's kind of buried it under economic necessity.
Right. The sources explore how historical forces really shaped how societies measured value, mostly, yeah, through that economic lens.
And so our mission here in this deep dive is to look at that history, understand how things might be changing now, especially with, AI and automation, and really dig into what that could mean for how we see value in ourselves and others. It's
Yeah.
like a potential redefinition happening.
Exactly. We're looking at the journey the material describes from a past where value was so tied to just producing stuff towards maybe a future where our intrinsic worth comes out more.
So right off the bat, the material points to this core tension.
Hmm.
Our inherent value, our unique talents, how we connect, it's been obscured by something very real. Scarcity, economic scarcity.
Mm-hmm. That's the main argument. The sheer need to survive, to make a living, historically forced societies to prioritize, well, whatever was economically necessary, often over individual talents or what people actually wanted to do.
And you see these examples throughout history, right? Like the agrarian age.
Yeah, the agrarian age,
Hmm.
back then, the absolute number one thing was growing food, period. So if you were, say, a natural poet or thinker, great, but
Didn't put food on the table.
exactly, you had to work the fields. Those creative talents, they were secondary because the immediate pressing need was survival. That dictated where all the effort went.
But then, okay, the Industrial Revolution rolls around. Different
Yeah.
setting, but same basic pressure.
Pretty much. The factories needed workers. That was the demand. So
Mhm.
people, almost no matter their skills or passions, ended up in these, repetitive factory jobs.
Right?
The material mentions potential artists, writers. They swapped that for the assembly line. Value just got narrowed down. It was all about efficiency, productivity in that system.
Even something huge like the World Wars seems to fit this pattern.
Mm.
Necessity overriding everything else.
It does, yeah. The sources point out during the wars, you had maybe teachers, doctors, lawyers sent to the front lines, roles totally different from their skills.
Uh-huh.
Because the big societal need was collective survival. So value got framed by your contribution to the war effort, often meant setting aside your specific talents for the, perceived greater good.
So wow, a huge chunk of history, it feels like this economic need, just making a living, was the main way society sized people up. You contributed economically, often in ways that didn't really use your best talents.
That's definitely a key point in the material. It wasn't that talents didn't exist, obviously, but the economic systems just prioritized certain skills. They rewarded those. Now, there were exceptions, sure.
Right, the comedians, athletes, artists who lined up with making money.
Yeah, those whose talents did find a market. But the material kind of frames those as historically not the typical experience for most people. Making a living meant fitting the economic mold, often pushing down their innate strengths.
Okay, but what's really interesting is that the material also shows these little glimpses, hints that the idea of value beyond just economics has always been there, even if it wasn't the main thing society measured.
This is where we get some really powerful examples, starting right from early childhood.
Ah, the baby example. I
Yeah.
like that one.
Yeah, think about it, right? A baby arrives, no developed personality, can't contribute economically at all, requires tons of resources, care,
And yet,
and yet, like the
but
material says, their presence brings so much joy, love, connection, emotional fulfillment. It completely enriches the lives around them, and you can't put a price on that. It's just pure intrinsic value right from the start.
and then there's the Titanic example. More dramatic, but it makes the same point about recognizing value that isn't about economics.
That deep-seated instinct, maybe.
Prioritizing women and children first.
Exactly. That decision in that crisis wasn't about who was richest or most productive. It was based on something deeper, recognizing the inherent value of life itself, especially vulnerability, potential.
Uh-huh.
It just highlights that even when economic pressures were huge, there were these moments, these instincts that showed a different understanding of human worth, something beyond just what you produce.
Okay, so now the material shifts us to the present, saying we're maybe on the edge of a really big change. Automation, AI.
Right, and this is where that history matters. The argument is that these technologies are fundamentally changing the equation. The need for human labor in lots of traditional jobs, it's decreasing.
So that constant historical pressure,
Mhm.
the one defining value, almost only by economic output, that might actually be easing up.
That's the idea. As machines get better at the routine stuff, the material suggests society's emphasis on just economic contribution might start to lessen. And that, they argue, opens up a unique opportunity.
An opportunity to reassess how we value people, define success differently, what kind of qualities might become more important.
Well, the material points towards those intrinsic human qualities, the things machines find hard, right? Compassion, creativity, intuition, empathy.
Oh, okay.
These become more valuable when the purely economic tasks are handled elsewhere.
Like the example they gave, someone with real empathy focusing on humanitarian work or building community.
Exactly. In a system less obsessed with pure economic output, that person's contribution to well-being, to connection, just enriching the human experience that could be valued much more highly, much more than their ability to do a task a machine can now do. The shift could allow people to align their lives with their actual talents and passions in ways that just weren't possible for most people before.
And it's interesting, the material doesn't just say technology is causing this shift, but it could also help us unlock this inherent value, an enabler.
That's a really key point. By taking over the mundane tasks, tech doesn't just displace labor, it can potentially free up human time and energy to pursue things more aligned with those intrinsic abilities we were just talking about.
How specifically does the material see technology doing that?
Well, it mentions things like AI-powered education platforms.
Yeah.
Imagine systems that could really help individuals identify and nurture their unique talents, maybe from a young age,
Okay.
and collaborative tech connecting people globally, finding opportunities, communities that match their specific passions, their skills, regardless of where they live, or the old economic barriers.
And we've kind of seen hints of this already online, haven't we? With things like YouTube, Patreon, maybe TikTok.
Absolutely. The material uses those as examples. Places where people who maybe didn't fit the traditional economic mold, artists, niche educators, unique creators, they've found ways to share their gifts globally, build followings, even get direct support.
Right.
And the idea is that AI and more automation could just expand that trend massively, allowing even more people to focus on what they're naturally good at, what they love, and find real value and purpose in doing that.
Okay, so this sounds potentially quite optimistic, this future. But the material is also clear. This isn't an easy switch. There are challenges.
Oh, definitely not easy. Moving from a society built for centuries around economic productivity to one that truly prioritizes intrinsic value, that's a huge, huge shift.
Especially when our institutions, our social norms, even how we think about ourselves. It's also tangled up with jobs and income.
Precisely. It needs a deep cultural shift, and the material delves into what that might actually involve.
Including maybe redefining what success even means.
Fundamentally, yes. Moving past just looking at income, job titles, GDP, towards more, holistic measures like personal fulfillment, societal well-being. How is someone contributing to human flourishing, building community, caring for others, creating art?
And education would have to change too, big time.
The argument is, education systems now are heavily geared towards workforce prep, right? They'd need to evolve, put more emphasis on personal development, creativity, critical thinking, emotional intelligence. Basically nurturing those intrinsic qualities that become more valuable in this future.
And this kind of shift might even mean rethinking things like safety nets.
Yeah.
Economically.
Yeah, the material brings that up. The potential need for policies like universal basic income, UBI, or other safety nets. The thinking is, if you reduce that intense economic pressure just to survive.
People have more freedom?
Exactly. More freedom to explore, to pursue activities aligned with their passions, their inherent talents, instead of just being forced into whatever job pays the bills.
So success in this kind of future, it might look less like climbing the corporate ladder and more like something else entirely.
That's the suggestion, yeah. Success could be defined by living authentically, doing meaningful things that contribute, volunteering, caring for family, making art, sharing knowledge. These kinds of contributions could become just as recognized, just as valued as traditional jobs.
Wow.
And that challenges all of us, doesn't it, individually, to really think about our own values. What actually makes for a fulfilling, valuable life?
The material even points to places where we can sort of see these different value systems starting to emerge already.
Right, and mentions the creative arts platforms like Bandcamp, Kickstarter. Artists getting direct support because people value their work, bypassing the old gatekeepers. Or the growth in nonprofits, community work, people finding real fulfillment in service, in compassion, often choosing that over just maximizing profit.
And tech, too, like open source.
Yeah, open source movements,
Yeah.
where the value is in shared knowledge, collective progress. The reward is often recognition, purpose, not just money. These are like little glimpses of a world where intrinsic value is becoming more of a driver. So if you trace the path the material lays out, it's quite a journey. From history where economic limits often hid our inherent worth, through these moments where that deeper value still shone through,
Right.
to now where technology might actually be giving us the chance to redefine value, to put things like compassion, creativity, those human qualities right at the center.
And understanding that history, that potential future, it kind of helps make sense of shifts we see today, doesn't it? How people are rethinking work, what they value, their own definition of a good life. It really encourages you, listening, to think about your own inherent worth, how you might contribute beyond just, the economic side of things.
And the material really leaves us with a powerful question. It frames it as the challenge right in front of us. How can we actively participate in this transformation?
Yeah, I like that. It's not passive. It suggests we all have a role. Individuals, communities, institutions.
Hmm.
We have to make conscious efforts. Maybe that's supporting systems that value well-being over pure profit. Maybe it's pushing for policies that give people more freedom.
Or maybe it's simpler, too.
Or just making a real effort to see and celebrate that unique, inherent worth in ourselves and, importantly, in the people around us, looking beyond just what they do for a living.
Definitely something to ponder as we navigate, this very changing world.